George's ex-wife testifies and says after she married George, they lived with Angela and Billy and got pregnant. And what a surprise, Angela got super controlling over her and her baby and their family. She said she would make George's wife leave the bedroom she shared with her husband at night so that she could scratch her son's back.
Bro.
She did this every night.
Shut the fuck up.
I know.
That's so fucked up presents. That's so fucked up presents. That's so fucked up presents. That's so fucked up presents.
Hey everybody, welcome back. This is That's So Fucked Up, a podcast about things that make you say, ugh, that's so fucked up. We're your hosts. I'm Ashley Love Richards.
I'm Fallon Maury.
We're highly efficient now. We're medicated. It's wild, you guys. And if you're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Go back and listen to part 1. I was thinking about this, how we could make that like a Easter egg so that we don't have to do a recap of part 1, because people should go listen to, you know what, we should still do a little recap, but we won't explain that Easter egg of we're medicated and efficient. So you guys will have to listen to part 1 first if you want to know what I'm talking about. But should we just give like a little baby recap?
Let's give a little baby recap. We started out talking about the Pike County Massacre in Ohio. 8 people from a single family were basically killed in one night. The police searched for clues and motives and really couldn't figure out kind of what was going on. And so a lot of potential theories came up. And the biggest one that has come up so far is the possibility that 2 families were in a marijuana business together.
Dun, dun, dun.
The family that our victim's family was in business with has some highly unusual behavior.
Things are sus AF.
They are right now.
Yeah, you got to listen to the first episode, though, you guys, because I literally wrote out.
She did.
I wrote, I don't know, a list, I guess.
I've never seen her take notes.
There was a little bit of a chart going on because I had like arrows pointing like that is the, because there's 8 victims. There are multiple potentially perpetrators. There's so much happening, you guys. So you really do have to listen to part 1 or else you'll be pretty fucking lost. So do that and then come back. Fallon, are you ready to fucking finish this bitch?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay.
So the BCI thought that the Wagners might have had something to do with the murders, but the problem was they could not pinpoint which Wagner was responsible. Angela's brother, Chris, who we've talked about in this thing, said that Angela was pretty badly abused when she was a kid by her biological father. He controlled absolutely everything that she did. She had at one point joined the military to get away from her home life, and she had some bad things happen to her while she was in the military. And she always wanted to be able to control and manipulate everything in her family's life. She had been SA'd while she was in the military, and he thought maybe this assault could have been a trigger for her possibly developing this super controlling behavior, because she had said that she had felt like out of control during the time period when that happened. So he thought maybe like because she had said, I wasn't in control, so this happened to me, which I think is like a self-blaming thing that sucks. But this is just what people speculated.
It's so interesting. I was actually just talking to my partner this morning about like how so many fucking things and crimes especially, you know, are motivated by power. Like rape is rarely about fucking sex. Very rarely. That shit is about power.
Yeah.
People who start cults, that is 1,000% about power. Generally, you fucking murder somebody, that's because you want the power to be able to control whether or not somebody gets to live or die. So it would make sense to me, not that it fucking justifies it whatsoever, but somebody who experiences powerlessness multiple times throughout their life. I might be talking about myself a little bit too. Then maybe becomes a little bit controlling, you know?
But I mean, also, if you think about, like, I've done a lot of reading lately on narcissism, and if you think about people who are narcissistic and get very controlling, they also are looking for someone to give them that power over something else. And it's not excusing their behavior, but they clearly need somebody like making them feel powerful over other people to like
it's
gratify
like sad
them.
because narcissism is most often a product of trauma. So it's like you want to feel empathy and compassion for narcissists because it usually is because things didn't go great for them. But then they're also terrible people who do awful fucking things. So it's really hard to find when does the empathy end, because it's like, well, now you're just a perpetrator and a monster yourself.
Right.
Ugh.
Right. It's a weird
line.
Circle. So after her sons were born, they had become her absolute whole world. She homeschooled them. She was overprotecting. She was overly involved in their lives. She was so controlling that if the kids had one thing out of place, like in her house or in their room, she would lose her mind. Her one son, George, just sort of tolerated her. He didn't like how controlling she was, but he went along with what she said. But Jake was always her absolute favorite.
So these men, they grew up to be men, but they were conditioned from a young age to do as mother says, or else you will not be loved or you will be punished.
Exactly. So then, not surprisingly, Jake was reported to be, by his friends, extremely controlling. One of his friends, who was a female named Samantha, said that he had demanded of her to know who was texting her, even though they were just friends. They weren't in a relationship, and he was still like demanding to know who was contacting her.
I'd be like, why don't you go fuck yourself? You're not my friend anymore.
I know. What the fuck?
Fallon, if you ever ask me, like if we're ever together and you go, oh, who you texting? I will fucking punch you and defriend you forever, okay? I'm just kidding.
I wasn't planning to ask you.
But no, because I mean, we could definitely be together and I could say, oh, who are you texting? And that wouldn't be weird, you know?
No, it wouldn't. But now I'm going to punch you in the face for it.
Make it super weird. But no, if like one of my friends, especially a dude, in like a weird way was like, who you texting? Or my boyfriend, or I'd be like, your mom, that's who. Get the fuck out of my face. So anyway.
So this friend of Jake's didn't think that Jake had been mentally mature enough to handle a girlfriend, but apparently Hannah had just liked the challenge of Jake. She said he was bossy and actually kind of boring and didn't ever want to like go out and do anything, but she stayed with him anyway. In November 2013, they had a daughter and the dynamics of their relationship completely changed.
How old was she?
So killed in 2016. So she would have been 16, 15 and a half, 16. So here comes Jake, who has been conditioned to control people by his whole life by his mom. He has a girlfriend. They have a baby. So mom steps in. Angela steps in and says, like, I run the show. I want to make all the decisions about your baby. Hannah didn't like her taking over. And Jake basically supported his mother more than her. Jake started to get physical with her and was constantly in her face, telling her what she can and can't do, who she could or could not talk to, and where she could or could not go.
And most of this is coming from Angela, presumably.
Right. And Jake is being empowered to like basically clamp down the controls on Hannah. So when their daughter was born, she wanted to continue school and to go to work, and Jake didn't want her to because he wanted her to be a housewife and raise kids like his mom.
The trad wife movement isn't dangerous at all, you guys. Like, not at all. Dude, okay, Hold on. Fuck off. Hold on. Is this not all about weed?
No, it's turning out as they're like uncovering this stuff by talking to people, like what this relationship was like, and that it is likely not about weed.
Bro, you just threw a huge fucking wrench in the works. I thought this was a weed war. Like,
right.
Yeah, you know.
That's why it's wild, because that's what it looks like at first. The police grab on the first thing they find, which is there's weed on the property. He was growing weed with this family, the Wagners. We brought this guy in for questioning. He sounded super suspect, and then they fled to Alaska.
Right. And I mean, it makes sense. People go into business together and they have fallouts, and that goes poorly.
Yeah, exactly. And then they're thinking, okay, well, maybe this is just a case of like a business deal, especially with them selling their property. And then they start, I think in the background, they're still looking into this sort of weird relationship with Jake and Hannah and like how this might have affected it. And as they dig in there, they're finding more and more, I think, about how Angela is very controlling. She's sort of like the matriarch of the house. And Hannah's mother, Dana, who was also killed during the massacre, was concerned with Jake's behavior that was very controlling of her daughter. He had an incident where he held her against a wall and tried to choke her, which is when Hannah decided to leave Jake. She took her daughter and she went back home to live with her mother and basically trade custody of the baby back and forth.
Okay. I think this is a really important time also to make a PSA to anybody who doesn't understand this, because I got to a very heated conversation recently about why people don't leave situations of domestic abuse. Well, Fallon, why don't they just fucking leave? Because when they leave is the time that they're in the most fucking danger. Like I'm getting upset saying that. People need to understand that, okay? When you're in a situation of domestic abuse, the person is in very much danger while they are in the situation. Of course. Guess what? When they leave, the danger fucking increases because psychopaths want to control things. So if you ever know anybody in an abusive situation, how fucking dare you if you ever say, why don't you leave? Okay, let's all educate ourselves on coercion and power dynamics and abuse and stop victim blaming, because the why didn't they leave is, it's so victim blamey, and you see time after time again that people do fucking leave, and that's when people die.
And I can say, even when you're in a relationship that is abusive and not physically abusive, and people are like, well, it's not like you're being hit and in physical danger, why don't you just leave? Well, because they're an absolute narcissistic psychopath, and if you're able to break through the manipulation of them that they kick on when you're trying to break up with them, and you finally get out, you're probably going to be suspect to having your life torn apart by them. Like, I had my job threatened. I had them writing to my bosses. I had the person talking about me to other professionals in my field.
Trying to ruin your life by all other means.
I had them stalking me and sending my friends messages to send to me to let them know that they were like watching me in public places.
God.
And I wasn't physically abused, but if you knew that was waiting for you on the other side, why would you leave? Especially now knowing how hard it is to be a mom of a baby. I can't imagine the mental energy of trying to think about what you're going to do when you leave this relationship and have to worry about your baby.
Right. And that's why we're going to talk about trad wives at some point, and why the idea that just make sure you pick right and then put all of your trust into that man to take care of you and your children forever. Oh, that's another thing I freaked out online about. And I don't think I went off in the comments too much, but somebody said something. I was watching a video about trad wives, and this woman is like, I was a trad wife and this happened, that one. And her advice at the end of this very vulnerable, educational, informative statement is, be really careful who you pick, ladies. I was like, you poor fucking woman, you're still blaming yourself for everything that you just said happened to you. You still internally blame yourself because you picked him. People are super good at being tricky. They're like, oh, look, I'm so fucking cool. And then they flip the switch. That's what psychopaths and sociopaths and narcissists do. Like, they don't start off acting all psychotic and scary. That comes later.
No, they love bomb you. Like in a cult, they love bomb you.
So I think I really love that we were able to bring that point up, because it's never pick better or why don't you leave. That's never an appropriate thing to think or to say to somebody.
No. So remember how at the beginning I said that friends of Hannah's said she was just the most, like, the strongest chick her friends knew, right? Like, she did not take shit. And so good for her. Like, she goes, I have this baby. I've been in this relationship for 5 years and I'm getting abused now. I'm leaving. She leaves, and she at least has her parents to go back to because they live nearby. So she goes and lives with her mom, and she and Jake have a sort of a verbal custody agreement, but nothing formal. Well, the Wagners, his family, are still being super controlling about the baby. They don't want Hannah to put the baby in daycare while she works, and they're trying to step in on that and saying, we think the baby is going to be kidnapped or abused, which is just wild. And then they also start to get paranoid and possessive to this extreme degree. And at this point, they start demanding, well, if you're going to put your baby in daycare and do all this stuff, we want Jake to have full custody of this baby.
Okay, you're tripping me out. Is this unfolding into like a cult situation?
No, this is unfolding into like a, we didn't get what we want, so we snapped situation.
Okay, I was like, Hold on. Are they keeping all the babies?
No, we're boiling it down where their family is very controlling kind of from the top down. And now they're starting to think, shit, is this like over a kid? Is this over a custody thing? Because Hannah gets in a different relationship. She gets pregnant, and unfortunately she and her youngest child's dad break up. But she gives birth in April 2016, days before she gets murdered. And she had just posted in December 2015 on Facebook saying, I will never sign custody papers. They would have to kill me first.
Oh my fucking God. That's like the most damning evidence possible. She put that on Facebook?
Yes. So it turned out later that the Wagners had started to hack into Hannah's Facebook and screenshotting all her messages thinking, ooh, we'll use this to get custody of your baby. And they ended up being really important to the investigation. Jake had at some point during the investigation said, no, Hannah and I were on really good terms. We got along. But once they started to trace all these social media account evidence, they found that things were not completely as he had implied, obviously. Fast forward again, they're really looking at the Wagners now. 2018, March, the Wagners left Alaska permanently and moved back home to Ohio. George and Jake both got jobs at a trucking company, and the trucking company cooperated with BCI and allowed investigators to put wires into the truck, wiretap the truck.
So wait, they just moved back because they figured, you know what, enough time went by. We're obviously in the clear. Let's go back home. Essentially.
Basically. The wiretap picks up some awesome little conversational snippets. As the course of the conversations go on, they start getting more and more accusatory. Angela says, we got to figure something out because I'm just going to tell you something. We're running on borrowed time. I have the feeling that we're running on borrowed time. Jake says, first off, I know they're listening. They probably got the trucks bugged and the house bugged.
Idiot. Yeah, you're right. So why are you talking?
George says, Mom, I don't think they're going to arrest me. Everything they've got is on Jake. They're probably going to arrest Jake. Angela's saying, Jake, you have made 90% of our plans. Okay, I followed your decisions. Don't make me the bad guy.
The mom said that?
Yes.
What a cunt. Because that's a lie, right?
I know.
That's a lie. She fucking planned everything. And now she knows they're being listened to. So she's pinning it on her kid. Whoa,
basically.
Wow.
They get Jake saying, Mom, you're being paranoid. Angela saying, I tell you, if they frame us, I am not sitting in prison. And Jake saying, they won't keep me there forever. Finally, at some point, they capture Angela, telling Jake to stop talking about this, but it's a little too late. On November 13th, police arrest Billy, Angela, George, and Jake. The motive, they state, is the issue with the custody of Jake and Hannah's daughter.
So they killed 8 people because of...
We're getting there. Yeah, we're getting there.
What?
So the police, though, could not identify which Wagner was at home, in each home or in the homes, pulling the trigger. So the prosecution's strategy is to see if they can get one of the family members to talk. They, at first, all plead not guilty. Then in April of 2021, Jake rescinds his not guilty plea, and he pleads guilty to the aggravated murder of Hannah Roden. Video footage shows him expressing no remorse, even smirking as he speaks. He's like laughing about it.
Well, he probably like hated her because she had moved on, right?
Yeah. Or just that she wasn't going to give him custody and she wasn't going to just hand her baby over to them, and they're used to being controlling and getting everything they want. Jake agrees to testify against his other family members because they offered him basically if he testifies truthfully, then the death penalty would be off the table for the whole family. So he leads the police to the murder weapons. The guns had been put into 5-gallon buckets with concrete poured over top and dumped in a pond at the Flying W farm, which is the farm they'd owned. In September of 2021, Angela Wagner admitted to helping with the crime and pleaded guilty to lesser crimes in exchange for a 30-year sentence on the condition that she testified truthfully. They also bring George to trial, Jake's brother. They're alleging at his trial that the planning for this crime is happening over the course of 3 months, and the defense of George claimed like, oh, he's just totally innocent. They've destroyed his life. They're, these horrible controlling people. George has no motive because the custody was over Jake and Hannah's daughter, and saying like, well, just because he's a Wagner doesn't make him a murderer. There's no physical evidence that George was at any crime scene, and George said no to a plea deal. And he's always maintained his innocence. George's ex-wife testifies and says after she married George, they lived with Angela and Billy and got pregnant. And what a surprise, Angela got super controlling over her and her baby and their family. She said she would make George's wife leave the bedroom she shared with her husband at night so that she could scratch her son's back.
Bro.
She did this every night.
Shut the fuck up.
I know. While she lived with this family, she was not allowed to see her family and they were not allowed to come visit her. She wasn't allowed to get a phone or use
Fallon,
the internet.
You fucking lied. I asked you if this was turning into like a cult situation and you said no, and it is. No, shut the fuck up. Get out of here. Angela Wagner is hitting every fucking cult leader box. I'm not playing cult bingo, but if I were, she's controlling their behavior, their information, their decisions, their thoughts and emotions. She's having them like live on a compound. I feel like she's doing all the stuff. She's like a family cult leader.
I guess saying it that way, it makes sense to me.
So do you think she was sexually abusing all of her sons?
There's nothing in any of the documentation that said that, but I think she was abusing her sons as like a narcissistic abuser for sure. She was controlling her kids' lives. After George and his wife broke up, she set limits on rules on George and his wife's sex life.
She's a cult leader. Like her children are her cult members. It sounds like she was sexually abusing at least George. Scratching your adult son's back and requesting, nay, demanding that his sexual partner, his wife, leave the room while you do so. What do you think was happening in that home before?
I'm just saying I will not go on record with no evidence or discussion of it.
That's fine.
Printed anywhere.
I'm just saying I allegedly think that she is probably a sexual abuser as well. And I will go on record definitely saying that she is a cult leader.
But what they also did to her was when she left George, this woman left George, the Wagners had her sign a partial custody paper, but they tricked her and she ended up signing away full custody of her child and she never was allowed to see her son.
Okie doke. I wish you guys could see my face right now. By the way, Angela was 52 in November 2022, meaning by now she would be 53 or 54. So if she does have a 30-year sentence, then hopefully she'll die in prison, most likely.
Good.
She should have got life for orchestrating this whole thing. But getting 30 years when you're in your mid-50s is like essentially like getting life.
I agree. And she deserves it. So in the middle of George's trial, sort of as this is going on, Jake meets somebody and gets married to her.
Sorry, I just played cult bingo really quick, like just catching up. And cult bingo, guys, nailed it. Wagner cult.
So Jake gets remarried in the course of the final parts of the investigation and going to trial, apparently.
He gets remarried during that time? What a psycho.
Yeah, not after he was arrested, but this is happening in conjunction, like right before he's arrested. And this woman then comes out and says, okay, well, they demanded I cut ties with my family. He had to control all my passwords for social media, bank accounts. The family dynamic was weird. Angela and her sons went shopping together, ate dinner together, took Walmart trips together. They made group decisions for all activities. And Angela starts accusing this woman of trying to assault Jake's daughter with no evidence. And Jake basically says to her, well, if this is true, the right thing to do would be to tie her up in a barn, beat her to death, and then hunt her family down and kill them. So this woman is afraid for her life. This woman that Jake had remarried, she testifies at these trials that all this happened to her. They also introduce a piece of evidence that George's credit card statements had a charge for a phone jammer that was purchased a month before the murders, basically so that as they were killing the family, none of them could call 911 for help.
Is it ever explained why they felt the need? Oh my God. Did they kill the whole family so that nobody else in the family could get custody?
Yeah, I think essentially. So Jake testified that Billy came up with the idea to kill Hannah, his dad, but he also thought a plan up to just kill Hannah wouldn't work because he felt the Roden family would retaliate. So Billy said, you can't kill Hannah without killing everyone else. And Jake had testified that anyone else who happened to be at the residences would also be murdered because they all lived on that one property together. So we're getting to what actually happened. Jake's testimony states that on April 21st, Billy, George, and Jake were on their way to commit the murders. Billy pulls off alongside the road and gives the boys a last chance to back out, but Jake persuades Billy that it just needs to be done.
Billy, the dad, is like, are you sure you guys want to do this?
Yeah, and Jake's like, yeah, absolutely. Let's go kill the mom of my kid.
Right.
So they go to Chris Sr.'s house, so Hannah's dad. They get him to come to the door, and George was supposed to take a shot at him, but froze. Then Jake took over and shot Chris Sr. Billy also shot Chris Sr. and Gary Roden, who happened to be there. And then Billy went outside and had some sort of emotional breakdown about killing someone. And they went back in the house, drug the bodies back to Chris's bedroom. Then they went across to Frankie's house, who had nothing to do with any of their situation, walked in, shot Frankie. She started to stir in bed, so they shot her too.
Hannah, you mean?
Hannah. Yeah,
Right,
Jake's
so
fiance.
they shot Frankie and Hannah for no reason.
Yep, because they live there. Jake said he only shot Hannah because she happened to move. She stirred in her sleep.
Fucking psychopath.
Then they went to Dana Roden's home. Jake said he shot Dana 5 times in the head, walked down to Hannah's room and shot her, then went to Chris Jr.'s room and shot him multiple times in the head. Lastly, they went to Kenneth's house, who was sort of, I guess, one of the last of the Rodens they know about, and then they killed him. The problem with Jake's testimony was that it could not be corroborated.
His testimony.
Nobody else was testifying the same as him. So then they're like, well, nobody else's story matches
Because he was the only
yours.
one who wasn't working on a plea deal. So he was telling the truth and nobody else was.
Right.
Okay.
George testifies in November and says he strongly maintains his innocence, but he describes Angela as opinionated, that he didn't like being at home with her. He said that Frankie Roden was his best friend for his whole life. He also said he did not participate in any way, and he didn't know that Jake and Billy had even left the house that night to go commit the murders. He was unaware of the plan to kill the Rodens, he says, and if he had known, he would have found a way to stop it. But at the end of the month, November 30th, 2022, the jury deliberated for 7 hours to find him guilty on all counts and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Jake Wagner is serving 8 consecutive life sentences. Angela Wagner is serving 30 years. Billy Wagner's case is still pending. Right now, he's set to go to trial January 2025. The prosecution believed that Angela thought that sexual abuse was everywhere. She kept citing it as reasons to take these kids away from their parents, possibly because she was sexually abused when she was younger. So, she had managed to convince her sons and her husband. The prosecution actually called it a group psychosis. So they leaned less heavily on the cult issue and more on this. Well, I told them and we had to do it because otherwise our grandkids were going to get abused.
I actually just saw something too. I'm just scanning really quick, but I don't have time to look over this whole article really right now. But when I did say, oh my gosh, so it's it sounds like they're definitely a cult. I Googled Wagner family cult, and in one of the articles that comes up on the first page of Google, it says Angela Wagner, 52, mother to George Wagner and Jake Wagner, ... So I don't know what the context of this is, but someone says, I would say the Wagner family kind of evil is encouraged by the Trump cult. It's just interesting that you're saying Angela was oh, they're hurting the children because, the fucking extreme right loves to scream about saving the children while, whatever. Though during the fucking pandemic, they're oh, the masks are a way for liberals to traffic children. And they're always screaming about saving the children and Democrats being evil pedophiles. So the fact that Angela was oh, well, we've got to get the kids away from these fucking diddlers. It's who calls people diddlers? First of all, diddlers. Second of all, the fact that she was abused, it could have some effect on how she goes to believe and handle things later in her life, which I would see some correlation.
Right. She testified that she strongly believed that the motive wasn't about custody and like control of a child, but protection, because she said she thought something bad would happen to her granddaughter if her granddaughter was with the Rodens. And there was no evidence of the sort. It had never been done to any of the kids in the Roden family, but she was insistent. And then she got Jake to believe that his daughter would be assaulted. And then when he got remarried, she convinced her son again when his wife started being a mother figure to the daughter. She didn't like that. So then she's like, oh, I saw evidence that she's going to assault your daughter. It was just her MO.
Right. So she was on this fucking fear-mongering campaign about how the whole Roden family were just like pedophiles who would... So she thought that killing all of their parents and having all of those babies, besides Jake, who would ideally obviously get custody, right? Then the rest of the babies, what? They just go into the fucking system?
Right. She didn't give a fuck because they weren't her grandbabies.
She's like, I'm just saying it's going to happen and we can stop it. Angela Wagner, you're Charles Manson. Congratulations.
So speaking of the children, like what happened to the other kids that were involved? So the son of... I prefer not to say their first names of the children if I don't have to. I think that's
no, you don't need to.
Icky. So the son of Frankie Roden and Hannah Gilly, who was only 3 and had answered the door. It wasn't Hannah Gilly's son. It was Frankie Roden's son from a different woman. But his mother testified on his behalf and said that her son had told her, I've been scared since that night, knowing bad guys came into my house while I was sleeping. I'm always scared now that I will lose my mommy. And then the kid directly addressed George Wagner and said, you did that to me.
Oh my God. During the trial?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that fucking, I'm sure, put a goddamn nail in the... He's like, I wasn't there. I didn't know anything. I said, I don't think you guys should do this. Mm-mm.
Well, George's son, the one that they took away from his mother, now gets to live with his mother, and she gets to be remarried with other children. But the Rodens actually invited her over with her son, and her children gave them gifts because they were like a part of this tragedy as well, which is really sweet. The surviving Roden family.
Wait, who did that?
The surviving Roden family, so Chris Sr.'s mom and some of the surviving relatives invited over George's wife and her kids.
Oh, that's nice. They're like, you're obviously a huge victim in this too.
Part of this family trauma. Yeah. The little baby who was Frankie and Hannah's 6-month-old son or whatever that they had found at the house, remained in his grandmother's life. And they don't disclose who he lives with, but apparently he's very well taken care of. Hannah Riley, the little girl that was 4 days old when Hannah was killed, it's not disclosed who she's living with, but she's able to be in touch with her grandmother on her dad's side, and who said that she'll tell her about her mom and who she was and make sure she knows about her mom, which is sweet. And then the daughter of Hannah and Jake, the one who was 4 when her mom was killed, they don't disclose where she's living, but her uncle has said that she is being very well taken care of and she's doing well. Horrible tragedy for these kids, but it's good to know that all the children have the family they have left to get to stay in their lives. They're not just in a system floating around somewhere, according to what I've read. And it's just a shame that they had to be tangentially connected to the mini Manson family. And that's all I got to say about that.
I am out of words. It's all faces now. That's all I can do is make faces.
Well, and it starts off where you're like, why would somebody kill 8 people over some weed on a farm in Ohio? And then you realize that it's all because this one controlling lady convinced the males in her family that their kids were in danger. Why?
The weed would have made a lot more sense because people do get in drug wars all the fucking time. Like that is a thing that happens.
I know. I don't like the plot of this movie. Change it. But it's not a movie. It's fucked up.
Dude.
I mean, this is a perfect time.
Dude.
As we would say, this is not a movie. It's real as fuck and really, really fucked up.
That was like a story that makes you say, ugh, that's so fucked up. We did it. We did what we came to do. I hope you guys fucking liked what you got because, well, there it is. I don't know. You guys came. There it was. That was just like a lot. My God. Thanks, Fallon.
You're welcome. Oh, that was like a rhetorical thanks. I'm like, you're welcome. I'm going to go emotionally eat now.
I don't think there's anything else to say. We said it all. So I guess, bye, guys. Thanks for listening. Sometimes I just don't know how to end.
Bye.
I'm like, I don't know what to do with my hands. Neither of us do. So we're
Okay,
going to
bye.
press stop recording. Bye, guys. Bye.
That's so fucked up, that's so fucked up. So fucked up, that's so fucked up.